My name is Natalie. I am 34 years old and I am a forensic accountant. Last Sunday, my father tossed my house keys across the dining table and told me I had 48 hours to pack my bags and vacate my home. My mother smirked and told me to stop being selfish, claiming my younger sister and her husband needed the space for their new baby and his podcast studio. They threw a lavish housewarming party to celebrate claiming their dream home while publicly announcing I was a failure who never contributed to the family. What they did not realize as they bragged to their country club friends was that I had been keeping a massive secret for 3 years. They completely forgot to check the county property records to see who actually owned the estate they were standing in. Before I reveal how their perfect facade crumbled into a federal nightmare, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had a toxic family member try to take advantage of you. Silverware clinked in the formal dining room of the Chicago estate. I cut my steak accustomed to being invisible at these mandatory family dinners. My father, Richard, sat at the head of the table, projecting the image of a wealthy patriarch. Without warning, he pulled out the spare keys to the guest house where I lived and tossed them across the mahogany table. They hit my water glass with a sharp clink. I looked up, keeping my expression neutral. "What is this, Dad, you are moving out?" He said the words casually. "I need you packed and out of the guest house by Tuesday evening. Diana and Jamal are taking it over." I set my knife down. Taking it over, I asked. "My mother." Patricia did not look up from her salad. "Do not play dumb with me, Natalie. Your sister is pregnant and Jamal needs the space. Jamal is expanding his cryptocurrency business and needs the entire guest house to build a podcast studio and home office." I kept my voice level. "You are kicking me out of my home so Jamal can talk about digital coins on the internet." My father pointed his fork at me. "Your sister is right. Jamal is on the verge of a breakthrough with his crypto portfolio. They are the future of this family." You are 34 years old, Natalie. You are single, you have no prospects, and you are taking up a 2,000 square foot luxury guest house all by yourself. It is selfish of you to hoard that space when your sister is trying to build a family. Selfish. The word hung in the air. For 3 years, I had lived in the guest house, maintaining a quiet existence, paying my own bills, and enduring their constant belittling. "Mom, Dad," I said, leaning forward, "I have lived in that guest house without asking for a dime. I maintain the property. I pay for landscaping. I even cover the property taxes for the entire estate." My mother scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Oh, please, you act like paying bills makes you a martyr. You should be grateful we let you live here. Most parents would have kicked a 34-year-old spinster out years ago. You just go to work, come home, and sit alone. It is depressing. Diana is bringing life into this family. She needs the guest house for the baby nursery and Jamal's studio. You can go rent a small apartment downtown. It is more fitting for your lifestyle anyway." "So let me get this straight," I said, looking directly at my father. "You are demanding I pack up my entire life in 48 hours. You are kicking me out with zero notice." "We are not asking Natalie," my father replied, his voice taking on that authoritarian edge he used to intimidate people. "We are telling you, this is my property. I make the rules. You will vacate the premises by Tuesday at 6 in the evening. If your belongings are not out, I will have the estate staff pack them in garbage bags and leave them by the front gates. Do not test me on this." I looked at my mother, waiting to see if she would offer even a shred of maternal decency. Instead, she took a sip of her wine and sighed. "Do not make a scene, Natalie. Be useful for once and step aside. Your sister deserves this. She has done everything right. She married a successful man, she is giving us a grandchild, and she knows how to uphold the family image. You have been nothing but a disappointment since you chose to be a glorified bookkeeper instead of going to law school. Just go quietly and let us be happy." I stared at the two people who were supposed to protect and love me. They were dismissing me entirely, acting as if my presence on the property was an infestation they finally had the resolve to cure. My father wiped his mouth with a linen napkin, clearly believing the conversation was over. He honestly thought he had the ultimate authority over the land beneath my feet. He thought he owned the guest house, the main mansion, the pool, and the gates. He completely forgot what happened 3 years ago when his country club lifestyle drove him into complete and utter bankruptcy. He did not know I bought his debt. The front door chimed, signaling the arrival of the Golden Sister and her husband. They walked right into the dining room expecting to see me crying, but instead they found me perfectly composed. Diana stroked her stomach while Jamal admired his reflection in the hallway mirror. They had absolutely no idea that their arrogant behavior was being meticulously documented by a professional trained to spot liars. The ultimate reckoning was finally set into motion. Diana strolled into the dining room like she was walking a red carpet, her hand resting protectively over a barely visible baby bump. She wore a silk maternity dress that probably cost more than my first car. Right behind her was Jamal wearing a fitted designer tech vest and a watch that caught the light from the chandelier. He was already talking before he even pulled out a chair for his wife. "Richard, you should see the markets today," Jamal announced, clapping my father on the shoulder. "My digital portfolio is absolutely exploding. I shifted some assets into a new decentralized finance protocol this morning, and we are already looking at a 40% return. We are talking massive gains. The blockchain ecosystem is completely disrupting traditional finance. You should let me manage some of your liquidity, Richard. I can double your country club funds by next quarter. It is a new era of wealth creation, and we are right at the forefront of it." My father beamed at him, completely captivated by the illusion of success. "That is what I like to hear, Jamal. Smart investments. This family thrives on forward thinking and aggressive wealth management." I kept my face perfectly still, taking a sip of my water. Jamal had been playing this crypto billionaire role since he started dating my sister 2 years ago. He threw around tech jargon and talked about digital assets constantly, but I had yet to see him pay for a single family dinner. As a forensic accountant, I spent my days hunting down hidden assets and exposing financial frauds. I knew exactly what a grifter looked like, and Jamal fit the profile flawlessly. Diana settled into the chair next to my mother and let out a dramatic sigh. "I am so exhausted. Building a lifestyle brand while pregnant is basically 2 full-time jobs. But Jamal and I have been mapping out the guest house renovation all day. It is going to be absolutely stunning." She finally turned her gaze to me, her lips curling into a condescending smirk. "Oh, good, you are already getting the news. I hope you have some moving boxes handy, Natalie." I raised an eyebrow, setting my glass down. "You seem eager to get rid of me." "We are just eager to upgrade the space," Diana said, waving her hand dismissively. "Right now, it looks like a depressing office cubicle. No offense, but your style is incredibly boring." "I already called a demolition crew. They are arriving tomorrow morning at 8 sharp to tear down the walls of your bedroom. We need a massive open-concept layout for Jamal's podcast studio. The acoustics in there right now are terrible for his recording sessions." Tomorrow morning, I repeated, ensuring my voice carried no panic. "You hired an unlicensed demolition crew to smash through walls before I even agreed to move out." "You do not have to agree," my mother chimed in, passing a bowl of roasted vegetables to Jamal. "The decision is already made. You have 48 hours to get your things out of the way, but if the contractors need to work around you tomorrow, that is your problem. Your sister is creating a legacy." "What are you creating?" "Natalie, spreadsheets. You sit at a desk all day looking at other people's money. Jamal is actually making his own fortune." Jamal chuckled, leaning back in his chair and crossing his arms confidently. "Look, Natalie, no hard feelings. Business is business. I need a professional space to interview high net worth individuals for my channel. A guy in my position cannot be broadcasting from a cramped apartment. We need the luxury aesthetic. The guest house has the perfect view of the pool. It is just the next logical step for our brand." Our brand. They spoke as if they were a Fortune 500 company, instead of a self-absorbed influencer, and a man whose entire personality was based on imaginary internet coins. My father cleared his throat, looking at me with sheer annoyance. "Do not sit there pouting, Natalie. I expect you to be cooperative. Your sister is under a lot of stress with the pregnancy. Do not make this harder than it needs to be. Just pack your clothes and go quietly. They all stared at me, waiting for the reaction they had conditioned me to give since childhood. They wanted the tears. They wanted the desperate pleading. They wanted me to beg for a few more weeks to remind them that I had nowhere else to go on a Sunday night. They thrived on watching me break down so they could call me unstable and validate their own cruelty. But the woman who used to cry for their approval died the day I found out my father had secretly bankrupted this entire family. I did not shed a single tear. I did not raise my voice. I reached for my linen napkin, calmly wiped the corners of my mouth, and placed it neatly next to my plate. I pushed my chair back and stood up. The dining room went completely silent. I looked at my father, then my mother, and finally rested my gaze on the golden couple sitting across from me. I will be out by tonight, I said. Diana frowned, clearly confused by my lack of resistance. Tonight. You are leaving tonight? Yes, I replied, offering them a bright, chilling smile. I will pack my things and hand over the space. Just remember you all chose this. My mother let out a short, mocking laugh. Oh, spare us the dramatic exit, Natalie. Nobody feels guilty here. We are doing what is best for the family. I nodded slowly. You absolutely are. Enjoy your dinner. I turned and walked out of the formal dining room, my heels clicking rhythmically against the hardwood floor. As I crossed the foyer, I could hear Jamal making another loud, boastful comment about his crypto gains, followed by the sound of my parents laughing. I walked across the manicured courtyard to the guest house. The night air was cool and crisp. I stepped inside the 2,000 square foot space I had meticulously maintained. It was immaculate, quiet, and peaceful. I walked straight to the hidden floor safe in my closet, keyed in the code, and pulled out a thick manila folder. Inside were the official property deeds, the financial transfer documents, and the legal incorporation papers for Apex Holdings, LLC. I placed the folder safely into my leather briefcase. I did not bother packing furniture or heavy items. I grabbed my clothes, my electronics, my forensic accounting certifications, and a few personal items, throwing them efficiently into 2 large suitcases. I did not feel angry. I felt an overwhelming sense of liberation. The trap was already set, and they were sprinting right into it. 30 minutes later, I rolled my suitcases out to the driveway. Diana and Jamal had stepped out onto the main house patio with glasses of sparkling cider in their hands. They leaned against the stone railing, watching me load my car. Need any help lifting those? Jamal called out, his voice dripping with sarcasm. I would offer, but I cannot risk tweaking my back before my golf tournament tomorrow. Do not forget to leave the keys on the counter. Diana shouted, a triumphant smile plastered across her face. Make sure you do not take any of the good fixtures. Jamal needs a clean slate for the studio. We are going to put up soundproofing panels where your bed used to be. We are changing the locks anyway, but it is the principle of the thing. Bye, Natalie. Have fun in whatever tiny apartment you end up in. I closed my trunk with a solid thud. I looked at my sister, taking in her arrogant posture and the massive diamond ring sparkling on her finger. I looked at Jamal, who was busy taking a selfie in front of my father's luxury car. Then I looked at the sprawling $2 million estate bathed in the soft glow of landscape lighting. I did not say a word. I got into my car, started the engine, and pulled out of the driveway. As the massive wrought iron gates closed behind me, I glanced in my rearview mirror. The mansion looked perfect from the outside, a beacon of wealth and success. But I knew the foundation was rotting, and tomorrow morning the demolition crew Diana hired was going to swing the first sledgehammer right into their own demise. I merged onto the dark highway, perfectly calm, ready to make my next move. I merged onto the dark highway, perfectly calm, ready to make my next move. The dashboard clock glowed a steady red as I accelerated away from the estate. I tapped the screen on my console and dialed David. He answered on the second ring. Natalie, David said, his voice crisp and professional despite the late hour. I take it the Sunday dinner went exactly as predicted. Better. I replied, keeping my eyes on the road. My father threw my spare keys across the table. Diana and Jamal gave me 48 hours to vacate the guest house so he can build a podcast studio. They were incredibly smug about it. David let out a low, humorless laugh. The audacity is almost impressive. Do they still believe your father successfully negotiated a secret extension with the bank 3 years ago? They bought the illusion completely, I said. My father is convinced his country club charm saved him from total financial ruin. He has no idea that the bank actually foreclosed on the property, and he has zero clue who paid off the massive default to keep a roof over his head. Well, as the registered agent for Apex Holdings LLC, I can assure you the paperwork is ironclad, David stated. You bought that $2.5 million estate using your own capital and your forensic accounting expertise to restructure the debt. You are the sole owner of the property. Your parents are essentially month-to-month tenants living there entirely on your goodwill, and now they are illegally evicting their landlord. Exactly, I said, a genuine smile finally reaching my eyes. So it is time. I need you to activate the specific eviction clauses for Apex Holdings LLC, but do not send the notice yet. Let them get comfortable. Let Jamal start pouring his non-existent crypto wealth into renovations. I want them to dig a hole so deep they will never climb out. Understood, David replied. I will prepare the default notices for unpaid rent. Technically, you have allowed them to live rent-free, but the lease agreement I drafted when Apex Holdings took over stipulates a market rate if they ever violate the terms of occupancy. Illegally evicting the property owner definitely counts as a violation. Are you safe tonight? I booked a luxury suite downtown, I told him. I will sign a lease on a penthouse tomorrow morning. Let them have the guest house for now. They are about to learn a very expensive lesson about property law. 1 week later, I was sitting in my new high-rise apartment enjoying a cup of artisan coffee while reviewing financial statements for a corporate client. My firm had just secured another massive contract, and my personal accounts were thriving. The contrast between my quiet, successful reality and the loud, crumbling facade of my family was stark. My phone buzzed on the glass desk. The caller ID displayed the name of the president of the Homeowner Association for the estate's gated community. I answered immediately, switching into my professional persona. Good morning, this is Natalie. Ms. Williams, thank goodness I reached you. The HOA president, a rigidly strict woman named Barbara, said in a frantic tone. I know your father handles the day-to-day affairs at the estate, but since your name is listed on the emergency contact registry for Apex Holdings, I had to call you directly. We have a massive problem. What kind of problem, Barbara? I asked, opening a blank document on my laptop to take notes. Your sister Diana. Barbara huffed, her voice dripping with pure neighborhood watch indignation. She just rolled 3 heavy-duty unlicensed excavators past the security gates. They are parked on the front lawn of the main estate, tearing up the prize-winning landscaping. She claims she is initiating a massive open-concept renovation. A renovation, I repeated, keeping my tone perfectly neutral. Yes, a complete structural demolition. Barbara practically shrieked into the receiver. She told the gate guard she is knocking out all the load-bearing walls on the first floor to create a seamless indoor-outdoor entertainment space for her husband's business partners. Natalie, she does not have a single permit on file. The city has not approved any architectural plans, and the HOA board certainly has not authorized a major structural alteration to a $2.5 million property. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, staring out at the city skyline. Diana was moving faster than I anticipated, fueled by Jamal's fake crypto promises and her own desperate need for social media content. Did you ask her for the permits? I asked, gently guiding the conversation to ensure maximum liability fell squarely on my sister. I marched right up to the front porch, Barbara stated, her breathing heavy. Your sister laughed in my face. She said her husband is a tech billionaire, and they do not need to wait for local bureaucracy. She actually told me to go back to my knitting and let the visionaries work. The excavators are already preparing to smash through the brick facade of the guest house. I see, I said, suppressing the urge to laugh. Barbara, as the designated contact for the property's holding company, I am officially instructing you to document everything. Take photographs of the unlicensed equipment, note the names of the contracting company, and whatever you do, do not physically intervene. Not intervene, Barbara gasped. They are going to destroy the structural integrity of the estate. Exactly, I replied smoothly. Let them proceed. Send the formal violation notices directly to the residents Richard and Diana. Tally up every single fine, every city code violation, and every HOA penalty. Do not hold back. I will issue the maximum fines immediately. Barbara promised her authority validated. I ended the call and smiled at the incoming disaster. My sister was walking straight into a financial trap and I was holding the shovel. This was going to be incredibly fun. I immediately forwarded the notes from my conversation with Barbara to David. Less than 2 minutes later, my phone rang again. It was my attorney, and he did not sound nearly as amused as I was. Natalie, tell me the homeowner association president is exaggerating. David said, his voice tight with legal concern. 3 heavy-duty excavators on the front lawn tearing out load-bearing walls. Do they know what they are doing to the structural integrity of that property? Diana and Jamal operate purely on delusion and aesthetics, I replied, opening a new forensic file on my encrypted server to document the morning. They hired a discount crew who took cash under the table. Jamal wants his podcast studio to have a panoramic view of the pool by sunset. Structural integrity is not on their radar. I heard fingers flying across a keyboard on David's end of the line. This is a massive liability. As the legal owner of the estate through Apex Holdings, any damage done to the property impacts your bottom line. The fines alone from the city and the HOA are going to be astronomical, not to mention the cost of rebuilding whatever they destroy today. I am aware of the costs, David, I said calmly. That is the entire point. We need to send a cease and desist order right now. David urged, his instincts taking over. I can draft an emergency injunction and have a process server at the estate gates within the hour. We can stop those excavators before they do any permanent damage to the foundation. If we notify the authorities that the demolition is unauthorized by the property owner, the police will shut it down immediately. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the cool glass of my desk. A slow smirk spread across my face. I pictured my sister standing on the lawn, directing heavy machinery like she was producing a movie, oblivious to the legal avalanche hanging over her head. No, I said, my voice dropping to a cold, calculated whisper. Let them break the law. Natalie, this is a $2.5 million asset, David cautioned. If they hit a main water line or compromise the roof, the repair bill will be staggering. And the repair bill will be entirely in their name, I reminded him. Diana and Jamal are initiating the construction. They hired the crew. They are assuming the liability. If I stop them now, they get a slap on the wrist for a noise complaint. If I let them swing those sledgehammers, they commit to thousands of dollars in property damage and code violations. They want to play wealthy homeowners. I am going to let them experience the true cost of homeownership. David sighed, recognizing the forensic accountant logic in my plan. You want them to hang themselves with their own arrogance. Exactly. Keep monitoring the public records for the violation notices from the city. I will handle my sister. I ended the call and picked up my phone. It was time to engage in a little dialogue warfare. If Diana was going to destroy the property, I needed ironclad proof that she was doing it willingly, aggressively, and under the false assumption that she had the authority to do so. In court, intent and ownership, claims were everything. I opened my text thread with Diana. The last message was her mocking me as I loaded my car the night before. I crafted my response carefully, making sure to sound like the annoying, cautious older sister she always resented. Hi, Diana, I typed. I heard from someone in the neighborhood that you have heavy machinery on the lawn today. Just wanted to give you a heads up that the HOA is very strict about exterior renovations and structural changes. You might want to make sure Jamal pulled the proper building permits with the city before they start knocking down walls. The fines can be brutal. I hit send and waited. I knew my sister better than anyone. She hated being corrected, and she especially hated feeling like I knew more than her. I did not have to wait long. Less than 5 minutes later, my phone vibrated with her reply. I opened the text and smiled. It was the perfect admission of guilt. "Mind your own business," Diana wrote. "It is my house. I will smash whatever walls I want, you jealous loser. Jamal already paid the crew in crypto. We do not need permission from a bunch of bored housewives on the HOA board, and we definitely do not need advice from a spinster who lives in a rented box. Watch my live stream and weep." I immediately took a screenshot of the text message. I uploaded the image to my secure cloud server, backing it up in 3 separate locations. It was hard evidence. Diana had put in writing that she was claiming ownership of the house, that she was taking full responsibility for the unpermitted demolition, and that they were conducting illegal cash transactions with unlicensed contractors. It was a legal masterpiece, and she had handed it to me voluntarily, curiosity getting the better of me. I opened a fake social media account I used for investigations and searched for Diana's profile. Sure enough, she was broadcasting live to her thousands of followers. The camera showed her standing in the courtyard wearing a pristine white hard hat that looked like a prop. Behind her, the beautiful brick facade of the guest house was already crumbling. A massive excavator was tearing into the exterior wall of what used to be my bedroom. Dust and debris filled the air. "Hey guys!" Diana beamed into the camera, tossing her hair over her shoulder. "Welcome to day one of our $1 million renovation journey. Jamal is sparing no expense to turn this outdated guest house into a podcast studio. We are completely gutting the first floor. Out with the old, in with the absolute luxury." I watched the live stream with morbid fascination as the heavy machinery roared in the background, while Diana continued to pan the camera around the courtyard. She ensured she captured the absolute best angles of her expensive designer outfit against the gritty backdrop of active construction. She was completely oblivious to the reckless angle of the excavator bucket. The operator, clearly an amateur Jamal had found on some discount online forum, was aggressively trying to widen the physical opening between the guest house and the main estate. They were foolishly aiming for a seamless architectural flow, completely ignoring the critical fact that the central plumbing infrastructure ran directly through that connective wall. The machine jerked forward aggressively, its metal teeth tearing into the solid brick and drywall with a deafening crunch that made the audio on the phone distort. Thick gray dust plumed into the morning air, causing Diana to cough delicately and wave her manicured hand in front of her face. She started to say something about the necessary price of progress and creating a custom luxury vibe, but her arrogant words were abruptly cut off by a sound that made even my blood run cold from miles away. It was a deep, resonant boom, followed by a sharp, metallic screech that vibrated through the camera microphone. The massive excavator had not just grazed a secondary pipe, it had completely severed the primary pressurized water main for the entire $2.5 million property. A furious geyser of dark, muddy water erupted from the shattered brick wall with the incredible force of a commercial fire hose. The sheer volume of water was absolutely staggering. It blasted across the courtyard like a tidal wave, instantly soaking the construction machinery and blowing out the remaining French doors leading directly into the main house living room. Glass shattered everywhere, swept up in the violent current. On the live stream, Diana shrieked in absolute terror. The camera shook violently as she stumbled backward, her pristine white hard hat tumbling off her head and splashing into the rapidly forming mud pit. "Stop the machine," she screamed at the top of her lungs, her influencer persona completely shattering under the weight of genuine panic. "Turn off the water right now." The machinery operator jumped out of the cab in a panic. He took one horrified look at the catastrophic geyser and the unstoppable torrent of water rushing directly into the formal living room. He did not run toward the main shutoff valve located near the street. He did not grab his tools or try to assess the damage. Instead, he sprinted straight for his battered pickup truck parked hastily near the front gates. Hey, get back here right now! Diana yelled, the phone still accidentally broadcasting the disaster to her followers. You have to fix this mess immediately. But the discount construction crew was already in full retreat. Operating without proper municipal licenses, authorized building permits, or commercial liability insurance, they knew exactly what kind of financial disaster they had just triggered. The remaining workers scrambled frantically over the broken debris, tossed their heavy sledgehammers into the truck bed, and peeled out of the driveway. They tore up the pristine front grass and smashed right through a row of imported rose bushes my mother loved. They left the heavy excavator idling loudly in the flooded courtyard, its metal arms still resting heavily against the ruptured pipe, making the tear noticeably worse with every engine vibration. The live stream disconnected abruptly as Diana dropped her expensive phone into the rising floodwaters, leaving me staring at a silent black screen in my quiet downtown apartment. I sat back in my ergonomic desk chair, visualizing the destruction currently unfolding at my property. The main water line on that specific estate pumped hundreds of gallons a minute. With the heavy glass French door shattered, that immense volume of water had only one place to flow. It was rushing straight into the main house unimpeded. The entire first floor of the estate was famous for its custom wide plank Brazilian cherry hardwood floors, which had been installed by the original builder at an astronomical cost. Right now, those irreplaceable floors were completely submerged and rapidly warping. The incredibly expensive Persian rugs my mother constantly boasted about to her snobby country club friends were currently acting as giant sponges, soaking up gallons of muddy, pressurized water. The custom wooden baseboards, the antique mahogany furniture, the meticulously curated visual aesthetic that defined my parents' fragile social standing, all of it was being swallowed whole by a rising tide of disaster. Diana was undoubtedly standing in 3 inches of dirty, freezing water, her expensive silk maternity dress completely ruined, surrounded by the deafening roar of a severed pipe. She had absolutely no idea how to stop. She had arrogantly dismissed the warnings of the homeowner association entirely, bypassed the city permitting office, and purposefully hired untraceable ghost contractors simply to save Jamal a few $100s. She had aggressively demanded a massive open-concept layout for a podcast studio, and now she had successfully created a permanent indoor swimming pool in the formal dining room. The financial damage was going to be absolutely astronomical. Immediate water mitigation, long-term mold prevention, structural wall repair, and completely replacing the luxury cherry hardwood flooring would easily push the repair bill towards 6 figures. And because they were performing unpermitted illegal demolition work on a property they did not legally own, my comprehensive insurance policy under Apex Holdings would automatically legally subrogate the entire catastrophic claim directly to the reckless tenants who initiated the unapproved destruction. The liability fell entirely on their shoulders. I closed my laptop smoothly and took a long, satisfying sip of my artisan coffee, savoring the rich, roasted flavor on my tongue. The morning sun was shining brightly through my high-rise penthouse windows, casting a warm glow over my pristine living space. I did not need to rush over there to save them. I did not need to rush over there to save them. The chaotic symphony of their own arrogance was playing out perfectly without my intervention. For the next 3 hours, my phone remained blissfully silent. I knew exactly what was happening at the estate. The initial shock had likely worn off, replaced by the frantic scramble to find an emergency plumber willing to brave a flooded mansion. They would be wading through ruined luxury, shouting over each other, desperately trying to salvage whatever antique furniture was currently floating in the formal dining room. Then would come the devastating visit from the water mitigation specialists, followed immediately by the soul-crushing repair estimate. I poured myself another coffee, booted up my work monitor, and waited for the inevitable. Right on schedule, at exactly 1 in the afternoon, my phone screen lit up. The caller ID displayed my mother's name. I let it ring 4 times before answering, ensuring she felt the agonizing weight of the delay. I answered the call with a calm, perfectly pleasant tone. "Hello, Mother. Natalie." "Thank God you picked up," Patricia shrieked into the receiver, Her voice was shrill, trembling with a mixture of raw panic and her signature deeply ingrained entitlement. "We have a massive emergency at the house. Those absolute idiot contractors your sister hired hit the main water line. The entire house is flooding. The Brazilian cherry floors are completely destroyed. The Persian rugs are ruined. We had to call an emergency disaster response team, and they just handed your father the preliminary estimate." I kept my voice perfectly flat. "That sounds like a terrible situation for you all. How much is the estimate?" "It is $80,000, Natalie." Patricia practically screamed the number. $80,000 just for the initial water extraction, mold prevention, and basic structural repairs. That does not even cover replacing the hardwood or the drywall. The mitigation company is demanding a massive deposit up front before they even bring their industrial dehumidifiers inside. Your father is beside himself. Diana is sobbing uncontrollably on the stairs. She is stressed and pregnant, Natalie. This kind of trauma is incredibly dangerous for the baby. We need you to transfer the funds immediately. I paused, making sure I heard her correctly. You need me to transfer the funds? Yes. Patricia snapped, her tone instantly shifting from frantic to commanding. You need to wire $40,000 to your father's account right now so we can pay the mitigation deposit. You can pay the remaining $40,000 when the structural repairs begin next week. I know you have that kind of money sitting in your savings account. You are single. You have no real expenses. You just moved into some cheap apartment. It is your duty as the older sister to step up and fix this. Your sister is in a crisis, and family protects family. I let a long, heavy silence fall over the line. I wanted her to sit in the quiet, to let her own audacious demands echo in her ears. She had watched my father kick me out of my home less than 24 hours ago. She had called me a spinster. She had mocked my career. She had stood by while Diana and Jamal laughed at my departure. And now, standing ankle-deep in muddy water, her first instinct was to treat me like an automated teller machine. "Mother," I said, my voice dropping to a glacial chill. "I am slightly confused." "What is there to be confused about?" Patricia demanded, her patience clearly wearing thin. "We need the money right now. Stop playing these childish games and go to your banking app." "I am confused because just last night you told me I was a bitter disappointment who only looked at other people's money," I reminded her calmly. "You said I had no legacy and no future. Meanwhile, you and Dad were practically bowing down to Jamal. You told everyone he was a massive success." Patricia stuttered, clearly caught off guard by my refusal to immediately comply. "That was different. We were just having a family dinner. This is a legitimate crisis." "But wait," I continued, cutting her off completely. "Did you not say Jamal was a cryptocurrency billionaire? Did he not brag about making a 40% return on his decentralized finance portfolio just yesterday morning? He told Dad he was experiencing massive gains. $80,000 should be absolute pocket change for a tech visionary like Jamal. Why on earth are you calling your failure of a daughter to fix a plumbing bill? Just ask the billionaire to pull from his digital wallet." The stunned silence on the other end of the line was absolute perfection. I could practically hear the gears grinding in my mother's head as she tried to formulate a response. She could not admit that Jamal was completely broke without destroying her precious country club illusion. She could not force me to pay without acknowledging my financial superiority. She was trapped in a cold cage built entirely by her own vanity. "Natalie, please," Patricia finally whispered, her commanding tone crumbling into pathetic desperation. "Jamal's assets are tied up in complex international markets. He cannot liquidate them quickly. We are family. You have to do this." "Family does not throw family out on the street," I replied, my voice steady and completely void of empathy. "You made your choice last night. You chose the golden couple. You chose the fake billionaire. Now you get to enjoy the reality of your choices. Good luck with the water damage, Mother. I hear mold grows incredibly fast this time of year." I pulled the phone from my ear and pressed the red button, cutting off her frantic protests. I tossed the phone onto my clean glass desk and leaned back in my comfortable chair, a feeling of deep satisfaction washing over me. Patricia was panicking. The grand illusion was breaking apart completely. Back at the estate, the atmosphere was suffocatingly humid and reeked of damp earth. The foyer of the mansion looked like the aftermath of a natural disaster. Brown, muddy water covered the expensive Brazilian cherry floors, rising high enough to soak the baseboards and creep up the custom drywall. The priceless Persian rugs Patricia cherished were heavy, waterlogged masses of ruined fabric. The sound of dripping water echoed through the grand hallway, a constant mocking reminder of the catastrophic mistake Diana had made. Patricia stood in the center of the flooded formal dining room, the murky water seeping into her designer flats. She stared at her cell phone in absolute shock. The screen had gone dark after I ended the call. Her chest heaved as she struggled to process my refusal. She hung up on me. Patricia whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. That ungrateful wretch actually hung up on me. Richard waded through the water toward her, his face flushed with anger. The cuffs of his trousers were completely soaked, but he was too furious to care. What do you mean she hung up? Call her back right now. Tell her this is not a request. We need that deposit immediately or the mitigation crew is going to leave. She will not do it, Patricia cried, finally looking up at her husband. She laughed at me, Richard. She said she is not paying a single dime. She said we should ask Jamal to use his billionaire crypto funds to fix the house. Richard's jaw tightened. He turned his gaze toward the grand staircase where Jamal was currently pacing on the lowest dry step. Jamal was tapping on his smartphone, his confident swagger replaced by a frantic, nervous energy. Diana sat on the step above him, holding her ruined maternity dress away from the water, sobbing loudly into her hands. Fine, Richard barked, splashing over to the staircase. Natalie wants to be a selfish brat. We will deal with her later. Jamal, step up. We need 80,000 total, but the immediate deposit is 40,000. Transfer the funds to my account right now so I can hand these contractors a certified check. We will figure out the renovation budget once the house is dry. Jamal stopped pacing. He looked up at my father, a bead of sweat rolling down the side of his face. The cocky tech visionary persona he had worn at dinner the night before was rapidly melting away. It is not that simple, Richard Jamal said, his voice lacking its usual boom. My assets are heavily decentralized right now. I have capital locked in high-yield staking protocols. You cannot just withdraw liquidity from the blockchain ecosystem on a Sunday afternoon. There are smart contract cooldown periods and withdrawal limits. I do not care about your blockchain ecosystem, Richard shouted, his patience entirely exhausted. I care about the fact that my dining room is a swamp. You bragged yesterday about a 40% return. You said you were swimming in gains. Liquidate whatever you have to liquidate and pay for the damage your demolition crew caused. Jamal swallowed hard, his eyes darting around the ruined room. You do not understand how the market works. If I pull out now, I take a massive penalty. Diana stopped crying and glared at her husband. Jamal, just pay them. Who cares about a penalty? My aesthetic is ruined. I was supposed to film my maternity photo shoot in the living room next week. My followers are expecting $1 million renovation journey, not a disaster zone. Just wire the money so they can clean this up. I cannot, Jamal yelled, his voice echoing sharply off the wet walls. The sudden volume shocked everyone into silence. Jamal gripped the banister, his knuckles turning white. I cannot wire the money, Diana. I do not have it. The silence that followed was heavier than the humid air. Richard stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. What do you mean you do not have it? You told me your portfolio was worth millions. Jamal let out a bitter, defeated laugh. It was worth millions. Last year. Before the market crashed. Before the exchange I was using filed for bankruptcy and froze my assets. The coin I was backing plummeted to zero 6 months ago. I lost everything, Richard. Everything. I have been living off maxed credit cards and personal loans just to keep up appearances. The cash I used to pay that cheap demolition crew today was the last advance I could pull from a predatory lender. I am completely broke. Diana let out a blood-curdling shriek. You lied to me. You told me we were rich. You promised me a custom podcast studio and a luxury lifestyle brand. I am pregnant with your child and you have nothing. Diana scrambled to her feet, her hands balled into fists. She threw a massive tantrum right there on the staircase, screaming and stomping her feet like a child. She grabbed a vase from an alcove shelf and hurled it into the muddy water below, sending a splash of dirty water across Richard's ruined pants. I cannot live like this, Diana wailed, her influencer facade shattered. I cannot be poor. You ruined my life. Patricia grabbed the banister for support, hyperventilating as the reality of the situation crashed down on her. Oh my God, she gasped, her hands flying to her face. Oh my God. Richard, we have no money to fix this. The country club is hosting their annual charity gala next month. What if the Worthingtons find out? What if the Harrington family hears about this? We cannot let anyone know we live in a swamp. Our reputation will be ruined. I absolutely refuse to be the laughingstock of our elite social circle. You two created this absolute disaster, and you are going to find a way to fix it today. Richard, you must do something immediately. We simply cannot lose our precious status over this. Richard rubbed his temples, staring at the muddy water soaking into his expensive Italian leather shoes. The pressure in the room was suffocating. Patricia was hyperventilating about her country club reputation, Diana was sobbing hysterically on the stairs, and the mitigation crew outside was threatening to leave if they did not get a $40,000 deposit in the next 10 minutes. Jamal watched the chaos unfold. He saw Richard cracking under the weight of his wife's demands. Jamal knew that if he did not come up with a solution right now, he would be cast out of the family and lose his free ride. He needed to pivot from being the cause of the disaster to being the financial savior. He stepped down into the water, ignoring the ruin of his own designer sneakers, and placed a firm hand on Richard's shoulder. Richard, listen to me, Jamal said, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial business-like volume. We are panicking over a minor cash flow issue. This is a temporary liquidity crisis, not a bankruptcy. We are sitting on a $2.5 million asset. This estate is a gold mine. We just need to leverage it. Richard blinked, his mind struggling to catch up. Leverage it? What are you talking about? A home equity line of credit, Jamal stated smoothly, throwing out the financial term with the confidence of a seasoned banker. A HELOC. It is the oldest wealth-building strategy in the book. Rich people do not use their own cash to fix emergencies. They use the bank's money. We take out a line of credit against the equity in the estate. We pull out $500,000. Patricia suddenly stopped hyperventilating. She turned toward them, her eyes widening at the number. 500,000, Jamal nodded, sensing he had an audience. Exactly. Think about it. We take out $500,000. We use 80,000 to pay these contractors and fix the water damage. We upgrade the floors. We get Diana her open-concept living space and the podcast studio. We turn this disaster into a luxury renovation that will make the country club members sick with jealousy. Diana wiped her eyes, her tears miraculously drying up at the mention of a massive renovation budget. But what about the rest of the money, Jamal? You said your crypto portfolio crashed. It crashed because of market manipulation, Jamal lied, effortlessly spinning a new web of deceit. But right now, the market is at absolute rock bottom. It is the perfect time to buy the dip. If we take the remaining $420,000 from the HELOC and inject it into a new highly secure blockchain protocol I have been researching, we will quadruple our investment in 3 months. We pay back the bank, we keep the renovated house, and we walk away with $1 million in pure profit. It is a foolproof wealth generation strategy. Richard stood silently in the swamp of his dining room, his mind swirling with Jamal's pitch. The irony of the situation was absolutely staggering. 3 years ago, Richard had completely bankrupted himself trying to maintain his country club lifestyle. He had defaulted on his mortgage. The bank had initiated foreclosure proceedings. But Richard was so deeply entrenched in his own delusion and arrogance that he refused to accept reality. When the foreclosure notices miraculously stopped coming, Richard convinced himself that the bank executives had simply reviewed his prestigious social standing and granted him a secret indefinite extension. He completely blocked out the memory of the dense legal paperwork he had blindly signed in a panic. He never read the fine print. He had absolutely no idea that his quiet forensic accountant daughter had stepped in, purchased the toxic debt, and legally transferred the estate's deed to Apex Holdings LLC. Richard honestly believed he was still the undisputed king of his castle. He believed his name was still firmly printed on the property deeds secured in the county records. Jamal's proposal stroked Richard's fragile ego perfectly. Taking out a massive loan to fund renovations and aggressive investments sounded exactly like the kind of bold move a wealthy patriarch would make. It allowed him to save face in front of his wife, pacify his demanding daughter, and avoid the humiliating reality that he did not have $40,000 in liquid cash to his name. "You are right," Richard declared, standing up straighter and adjusting his soaked trousers. "We do not need to beg Natalie for pennies. We are wealthy property owners. We control our own destiny. A HELOC is a brilliant strategic play. It is exactly what my financial advisors would recommend." Patricia clasped her hands together, a brilliant smile breaking through her previous panic. "Oh, Richard, that is wonderful. $500,000 will more than cover the water damage. We can finally install that imported Italian marble in the foyer like the Worthingtons have." "And my custom studio," Jamal added quickly, making sure his original demand was secured. "Yes, of course," Richard agreed, completely intoxicated by the fantasy of a $500,000 windfall. "I know a senior loan officer at the regional bank downtown. We used to play golf together at the club. I will call him right now and tell him I want to fast-track a HELOC application. He knows the value of this estate. With my pristine credit history and our significant equity, they will push the approval through in a matter of days." The sheer level of delusion required to make that statement was breathtaking. Richard's credit score was a smoking crater, but his arrogance shielded him from the truth. He genuinely thought a quick phone call to an old golfing buddy would magically unlock a vault of cash. Jamal grinned, wrapping an arm around Diana. "See, baby, I told you I had a plan. We are going to come out of this richer than ever." Diana beamed entirely, forgetting the disastrous flood surrounding her ankles. "We should throw a massive party," she squealed. "A combination housewarming and baby shower. We can invite everyone from the club. We will host it in the backyard while the interior renovations are happening. We will show everyone that the Williams family is thriving." Richard nodded enthusiastically, already pulling his phone from his pocket to make the call. "I will tell the mitigation crew that a wire transfer is pending from my private investment account. They can start bringing in their equipment immediately." They stood together in the ruined, waterlogged mansion, congratulating themselves on their financial brilliance. They were plotting to leverage an asset they did not own to secure a loan they could never qualify for, using an inflated sense of wealth that had died years ago. The entire scheme was a federal crime waiting to happen, and they were sprinting toward it with absolute joy, completely unaware that the real owner of the estate was sitting in a luxury apartment downtown, watching their every move. Richard did not waste a single second. He walked straight into his dry home office, shutting the solid oak door against the chaotic sounds of the mitigation crew dragging industrial vacuums into the foyer. Jamal followed closely behind, practically vibrating with nervous energy. Richard bypassed his usual contacts and dialed a specific number saved in his phone. He needed someone who bent the rules, someone who valued a golf handicap over strict regulatory compliance. The phone rang twice before a raspy voice answered. Richard explained the situation, layering his desperation under a thick coat of country club bravado. He claimed he needed a $500,000 line of credit immediately for emergency renovations and a highly lucrative business venture. The loan officer chuckled, assuring Richard that for a favored client, they could push the application to the top of the pile. But there was a catch. The officer needed the physical property deeds and a signed declaration of sole ownership scanned and uploaded to the bank portal by the end of the business day to lock in the fast-track approval. Richard opened his mahogany filing cabinet and pulled out the thick property dossier. He flipped through the crisp pages until he found the original deed from over 20 years ago. But right behind it was a newer document, a municipal tax notice he had ignored for the past 3 years. Jamal leaned over his shoulder, his eyes scanning the fine print. Jamal pointed at the bold lettering at the top of the notice. It lists the owner as Apex Holdings, LLC. Jamal stated, his brow furrowing. Why does it say that? Richard brushed it off with a dismissive wave of his hand. It is just some bureaucratic reshuffling the bank did when they restructured my mortgage during the brief liquidity crisis 3 years ago. I am still the ultimate owner. The bank just uses third-party holding companies for liability purposes. It is standard wealthy protocol. Jamal frowned, tapping his chin thoughtfully. If the bank requires a clear chain of title for a rushed line of credit, that holding company name might trigger an automatic manual review. A manual review means corporate underwriters get involved. They will ask for the incorporation papers, the operating agreements, and the executive signatures. That process takes weeks. We do not have weeks. The mitigation crew wants their remaining 40,000 by Friday, and my crypto presale closes in 3 days. We need this money right now. Richard stared at the old deed, the one with his and Patricia's names printed in bold ink. What do you suggest we do? Jamal smiled, that same predatory grin he used when bragging about non-existent digital wealth. He pulled a sleek laptop from his backpack and flipped it open on the desk. I am a tech visionary, Richard. Digitizing and optimizing documents is what I do. We just take your original deed, scan it into my editing software, and update the timestamp to reflect current ownership. We bypass the holding company completely. The local branch uses an outdated verification system anyway. By the time the central office audits the paperwork, the loan will be fully funded and dispersed. Once we double the money in the crypto market, we pay the loan back and the bank will not care how the paperwork was filed. It was a staggering leap in logic built entirely on criminal intent. Richard hesitated for a fraction of a second. He was a man who cared deeply about the law when it protected his wealth, but saw it as a mere suggestion when it stood in his way. He rationalized the crime instantly. It was his house, he built it, he lived in it, and he deserved the equity. He nodded, handing the old deed to his son-in-law. Do it. Jamal's fingers flew across the keyboard. He scanned the vintage document carefully, erasing the outdated filing stamps and replacing them with current dates. He crafted a flawless digital replica of a modern property deed listing Richard and Patricia as the sole unencumbered owners of the estate. The audience watching this unfold would recognize the sheer audacity of the act. They were sitting in a house owned by a forensic accountant using the very internet connection she paid for to commit a massive federal crime against her property. Jamal printed the fraudulent documents. He slid them across the desk toward Richard. I need you and Patricia to sign these declarations of ownership and the primary loan application. Richard took his expensive fountain pen and signed his name with a confident flourish. He walked out of the office, found Patricia screaming at a remediation worker, and pulled her aside. He handed her the pen. Sign this. It secures the $500,000. Patricia did not read a single word. She just saw the promise of money and signed her name right next to his, cementing her own involvement in the fraud. Richard brought the papers back to the office. Jamal scanned the freshly signed documents, compiling them into a single, highly illegal digital packet. He logged into the bank's secure lending portal. This is it, Jamal said, his finger hovering over the trackpad. Once I hit submit, this transmits across state lines to the bank's central processing server. It is official. Richard did not blink. Send it. Let us get our money. Jamal clicked the button. The progress bar loaded, filling with green until a confirmation message flashed on the screen. Application submitted successfully. They celebrated their supposed brilliance. They believed they outsmarted the system. They considered themselves masterminds manipulating an outdated banking infrastructure. They had no idea the digital packet transmitted across federal lines was the exact definition of wire fraud. They ignored that forging property deeds carried a mandatory federal prison sentence. Most importantly, They never realized that the moment Jamal clicked, submit a silent encrypted alert, pinged on a server across town, notifying the true owner that the trap was successfully sprung. Across town, my office was a sanctuary of glass steel and absolute silence. Sitting on the 42nd floor, I enjoyed a panoramic view of the Chicago skyline. My desk held only a sleek monitor and a cup of black coffee. As a forensic accountant, I was dedicated to finding the invisible threads of deception that wealthy criminals tried to bury. I tracked offshore accounts and exposed white-collar fraud. My parents thought my job was glorified bookkeeping, failing to understand the immense digital power I wielded. A crisp chime from my computer speakers broke the silence. A red notification banner flashed across my secure dashboard. When I purchased my father's toxic debt and transferred the estate to Apex Holdings LLC, I placed a top-tier title monitoring lock on the property. Any attempt to leverage the asset would immediately trigger a priority alert directly to my legal team and personal server. I clicked the notification, scanning the encrypted data packet intercepted by the monitoring software. It was a digital loan application submitted to a regional bank. The requested amount was $500,000. Before I could open the files, my secure direct line rang. It was David. I picked up the phone, keeping my eyes glued to the incoming data stream. "Natalie, tell me you are looking at the portal right now," David said, his voice a mixture of absolute disbelief and sharp legal focus. "They actually did it. They just submitted a fraudulent loan application for $500,000 using forged signatures. I am looking at the digital packet right now," I replied, my fingers flying across the keyboard as I downloaded the submitted files into a secure forensic sandbox environment. Let me see what kind of masterpiece Jamal managed to put together. I opened the primary document. It was supposed to be the property deed. I almost laughed out loud at the sheer incompetence on display. Jamal claimed to be a tech visionary, but his digital forgery skills were absolutely laughable. He had taken the original deed from 2 decades ago and clumsily altered the dates. I could clearly see the pixelated artifacts around the timestamps where he had used a basic digital eraser tool. The font he chose for the new dates did not even match the original typography of the county clerk office. "It is a complete disaster," I told David, zooming in on the fraudulent timestamps. He just photoshopped the old deed. He did not even bother to match the ink degradation. Any entry-level bank underwriter with half a brain would flag this in 5 seconds. "That is the terrifying part," David countered, his tone turning deadly serious. "They bypassed the standard underwriting portal. Your father submitted this directly through a senior loan officer he knows at the local branch. It is a VIP fast-track application. The officer likely pushed it through the initial automated screening based purely on your father's outdated country club reputation. The system accepted the upload. The fraud is officially in motion." I opened the next file in the packet. It was the Declaration of Sole Ownership and the Primary Loan Agreement. Right there at the bottom, crisp and clear, were the physical signatures of Richard and Patricia. They had signed away their freedom without a second thought. They both signed it. I confirmed, saving a certified copy of the document to my secure drive. They legally declared under penalty of perjury that they own a property they have not owned for 3 years. And Jamal is listed as the primary digital submitter. The IP address logged on the bank server matches the internet router at the estate. I pay that internet bill, so I have the network logs to prove exactly which laptop transmitted the files. David let out a low whistle. "Natalie, we are looking at a textbook case of federal wire fraud. By transmitting fraudulent financial documents across state lines to the bank's central processing servers, they committed a felony. Add in bank fraud, identity theft, and forging a federal document, and we are talking about decades in federal prison. The sheer volume of evidence they just handed us is unprecedented." I leaned back in my chair, taking a sip of my coffee. The rich, dark liquid tasted exceptionally sweet today. My parents had spent my entire life telling me I was a failure because I did not wear designer clothes or marry a wealthy man. They had literally thrown me out of my home less than 24 hours ago so a fake crypto billionaire could build a podcast studio. Now they had handed me the absolute power to destroy their lives with a single keystroke. So what is the play here? David asked, his lawyer instincts kicking into high gear. Do you want me to contact the bank's fraud department right now? We can freeze the application, alert the authorities, and have the police at the estate before dinner. They will be in handcuffs before the floors are even dry. I stared at the fraudulent signatures on my monitor. Sending the police right now would be quick, but it would lack the poetic justice they so deeply deserved. If they were arrested today, they could play the victim. Patricia would cry to her country club friends about a simple misunderstanding. Richard would blame an overzealous banking error. Jamal would claim he was just trying to help. They needed to feel the absolute peak of their own arrogance before the ground opened up and swallowed them whole. No, I said softly, a cold smile forming on my lips. We do not stop it. We let the application process entirely unhindered. I want them to firmly believe they have finally won. I want them to proudly spend money they do not actually have. When the illusion shatters completely, the financial devastation will be absolutely inescapable. They wanted a masterpiece. I will gladly give them one today. Are you absolutely certain about this strategy? David asked, his voice projecting professional caution and curiosity. If we let this advance, the bank will initiate their approval protocols. They might issue a line of credit based on the relationship your father has with that loan officer. If Jamal pulls cash out, the legal entanglement gets significantly more complicated. That is exactly what I'm looking for, I replied, typing rapidly on my keyboard. I will not let them actually withdraw the stolen funds, but I need them to receive the official notification that the loan is pending approval. Right now, they have only submitted the application to the bank. That is merely a weak attempt. If the bank generates the documents and they actually sign the final closing disclosures, the crime graduates to a fully executed federal fraud scheme. You want them to sign the final closing documents, David clarified, catching on to the sheer magnitude of the trap. I want them to feel invincible, I stated. I am logging into my forensic clearinghouse portal right now. Because my firm regularly audits regional banks for federal compliance, I have clearance to flag internal transactions without freezing them. I am going to attach a silent monitoring code to this specific application. I navigated through the encrypted layers of my financial software. With a few precise keystrokes, I isolated the digital packet Jamal had just transmitted. Instead of hitting the red button that would instantly alert the fraud department and shut the process down, I routed the application through a silent oversight channel. This action bypassed the automated forgery detection algorithms that would have normally caught the terrible Photoshop job Jamal did. The file landed directly on the desk of the corrupt golfing buddy my father knew, looking so completely clean. It is done, I told David, watching the status bar on my screen change from under review to pending approval. The loan officer just received it. He is going to push it through his fast-track protocol. Richard and Jamal will receive their preliminary approval notification by tomorrow morning. They are going to think they pulled off the heist of the century. They are going to celebrate. David noted a hint of dark amusement finally bleeding into his tone. They are going to throw a party, I predicted. Diana loves an audience. She will use this fake money to fund a massive event. And while they are picking out caterers and ordering expensive champagne, I will be building the physical documentation that puts them behind bars. I will start drafting the formal eviction notices and the civil suits for the property damage, David offered. We need everything perfectly aligned. Keep the legal drafts ready, but do not serve them yet, I instructed. I will call you when it is time to drop the hammer. Enjoy your weekend, David. I ended the call and cracked my knuckles. The digital trap was fully set. Now I needed to prepare the physical counterstrike. I knew that walking into a confrontation without a mountain of undeniable evidence was a very foolish errand. Liars like my parents and Jamal thrived in the gray areas of conversation. They could gaslight their way out of verbal accusations, but they could never argue with legally binding paperwork. I opened my secure safe and pulled out a thick black leather binder. This was going to be the playbook of the executioner. First, I printed the original foreclosure documents from 3 years ago. These highlighted the absolute bankruptcy of my father and his total default on the mortgage. Next, I printed the uncontested purchase agreements showing my shell company Apex Holdings LLC buying the debt directly from the bank. I followed that with the certified property deeds officially stamped by the county clerk, listing Apex Holdings as the sole owner of the $2.5 million estate. I added the bank statements showing 3 years of property taxes paid exclusively from my accounts, completely dismantling any argument that my parents had contributed a single cent to the upkeep of the property. The financial profile was devastating, but I needed the current damages well documented. I logged into the municipal portal for the city building department. Just as I suspected, the illegal demolition had already triggered a massive response. The city inspectors, likely tipped off by the homeowner association, had visited the property that afternoon. I downloaded the resulting documentation. The city had issued a stop work order. More importantly, they had levied a staggering structural damage fine of $150,000 for conducting unpermitted demolition on a residential property. Because Diana and Richard had signed the initial response forms when the inspectors arrived, assuming they were the homeowners, the fines were placed directly in their names. I added the city fines to the black binder. Then I accessed the homeowner association portal. Barbara had kept her word. There were 25 separate violations logged against the estate for the unauthorized heavy machinery, the landscaping destruction, and the shattered glass hazard. The HOA penalties totaled another $12,000. I printed every single violation and tucked them behind the city fines. My counter-strike was perfectly organized. I had the undeniable proof of ownership. I had the evidence of their massive financial liabilities. And thanks to my secure server, I had the digital footprint of their federal wire fraud. I closed the black leather binder and ran my hand over the smooth cover. Inside this folder was the complete, total destruction of the arrogant facade my family built. They had spent my entire life treating me like a worthless, invisible burden. They had taken my money, my home, and my dignity. But their unyielding greed had finally pushed them past the point of no return. They were planning a luxurious future built entirely on a foundation of spectacular felonies. I placed the binder carefully on my clean desk and smiled. By the next morning, my digital trap snapped shut. At precisely 9 o'clock, the bank's automated system generated a preliminary approval notification and sent it directly to Jamal's email inbox. The loan was pending final signature, but to my family, that email was a golden ticket. They did not understand the difference between a preliminary banking automated response and actual liquid funds. To them, the money was already in their hands. Their reaction was entirely predictable. Assuming the $500,000 line of credit was guaranteed, Diana launched into an absolute spending frenzy. I monitored her public social media accounts, watching the delusion unfold in real time. She began opening credit lines at interior design boutiques, maxing out whatever retail cards she possessed. She booked a premier catering company for her upcoming event. She ordered expensive imported floral arrangements, custom velvet seating rentals, and a towering 5-tier artisanal cake. She was funding a country club spectacle on the promise of a fraudulent loan. By Tuesday afternoon, Diana posted a video that rapidly went viral on social media. I watched her parade through the destroyed estate with profound amusement. She was wearing a brand new, wildly expensive maternity gown, carefully avoiding the worst of the mud and warped wood currently ruining the first floor. Hey everyone, welcome to day 3 of our $1 million renovation journey. Diana purred into the camera, holding her phone high to capture the absolute disaster behind her. She gestured toward the massive hole in the guest house wall and the ripped-up floorboards. As you can see, things look a little crazy right now, but you have to break a few eggs to make a luxury omelet. We are completely gutting this outdated floor plan, out with the old cheap materials and in with the bespoke Italian marble and custom acoustic paneling. Jamal stepped into the frame, kissing her on the cheek and flashing a 1,000,000-watt smile. He wore a new designer watch he undoubtedly put on credit that morning. All funded by my amazing hubby, Diana squealed, leaning into him. Jamal just secured a massive $500,000 budget for this project from his incredible crypto investments. We are turning this estate into a modern masterpiece. Stay tuned for the most epic housewarming and baby shower party this weekend. We are going to show this whole neighborhood how true visionaries live. Her followers were completely captivated by the illusion of boundless wealth and success. They had no idea they were watching two federal criminals standing inside a condemned, heavily fined property they did not even own. They were celebrating a renovation budget built on wire fraud and a fake cryptocurrency empire. I closed the application and shook my head. The sheer vanity was intoxicating them. They were so desperate to project wealth that they were completely ignoring the catastrophic reality closing in around them. My phone rang, breaking my concentration. My mother's name appeared. I let it ring twice before answering, eager to hear her latest performance. "Hello, Mother," I said, my voice perfectly pleasant. "Natalie," Patricia said, her tone dripping with smug satisfaction. "I am calling to formally revoke my request for your assistance. You can keep your little pennies tucked away in your savings account. We no longer need your help." "Oh, really?" I replied, feigning mild surprise. "Did you miraculously fix the water damage on your own?" Patricia let out a condescending musical laugh. "We did much better than that. Jamal just secured $500,000 for the estate. His investments paid off exactly as he promised. He is bringing in $500,000 to completely renovate the entire property. We are installing imported stone floors and a fully customized chef's kitchen. It is going to be the most magnificent home in the entire country club district." $500,000, I repeated slowly, letting the number hang in the air. "That is a very impressive sum of money." "It is," Patricia agreed, practically purring with arrogance. "It goes to show what real success looks like. I told you Jamal was a visionary. You were so quick to judge him, so eager to act superior because you have a steady paycheck. But true wealth comes to those who take bold risks. Your sister chose a winner, Natalie. You should take notes." "I am taking notes," I assured her, glancing over at the black leather binder resting on my desk. Every single one of their bold risks was thoroughly documented inside. "We are hosting a combined housewarming and baby shower this Saturday in the backyard." Patricia continued, clearly intending to rub my face in their perceived victory. "The entire country club board will be there. We have hired the best caterers in the city. We are going to celebrate Diana's beautiful family and our incredible new home design. It is going to be an event to remember." "I am sure it will be absolutely unforgettable," I said smoothly. "It is a shame you decided to be difficult." Patricia sighed, employing her favorite tactic of passive-aggressive guilt. "If you had just been supportive, you might have been invited to enjoy the champagne. But now you will have to sit in your apartment and wonder what it feels like to be part of a successful family." I leaned back in my chair. I felt absolutely no anger toward her words. Her pathetic attempts to make me feel small no longer worked. She was standing on a collapsing bridge, bragging about the view. "Enjoy the party, Mother," I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous calm. "I cannot wait to see it." I ended the call without waiting for her response. The trap was locked. They were throwing a massive, highly public event to celebrate stolen money and a stolen house. I picked up my phone and sent a quick message to David. It was time to arrange for some highly uninvited guests to attend the upcoming weekend celebration. Saturday morning arrived with bright sunshine casting a warm glow over the sprawling estate. The weather was perfect for an outdoor gathering, which was entirely necessary, considering the interior of the main mansion was still a damp, ruined disaster zone smelling faintly of toxic mildew. Patricia and Diana had orchestrated an aggressive cover-up. They locked all the French doors, drew the heavy silk curtains, and placed massive floral arrangements to block any view of the ruined Brazilian cherry hardwood floors and the giant hole in the former guest house. The backyard had been transformed into a scene straight out of a luxury lifestyle magazine. Two massive white canvas tents were erected on the pristine lawn. A string quartet played classical arrangements near a towering champagne fountain. Waiters in crisp white shirts circulated through the crowd carrying silver trays loaded with caviar blinis and truffle-infused appetizers. Patricia was in her absolute element. She glided across the perfectly manicured grass, a glass of expensive sparkling wine in her hand, greeting the wealthiest members of her country club. She wore a tailored pastel suit that screamed old money, desperate to project the image of a matriarch completely in control of a thriving dynasty. "Oh, Helen, it is so wonderful to see you," Patricia crooned, air kissing the cheek of the country club president. "Thank you for coming to celebrate Diana's new chapter. We are thrilled to finally have the entire estate to ourselves." Helen took a delicate sip from her crystal flute and glanced around the lavish setup. "It is a beautiful party, Patricia, but I was slightly surprised by the sudden transition. Did Natalie not live in the guest house? I thought I saw her car leaving late last Sunday." Patricia let out a practiced theatrical sigh, placing a hand over her heart. "It is a tragic situation, really. We had to ask Natalie to find her own place. Her jealousy over Diana's pregnancy and Jamal's immense financial success became too toxic for our family dynamic. We offered to help her find a modest apartment downtown, but she threw a terrible tantrum, always so bitter that she chose a boring desk job instead of building a real legacy." "How awful for you," Helen murmured sympathetically, completely absorbing the lie. "It must be difficult dealing with a child who refuses to meet her potential, but you certainly have a winner in Jamal." "We absolutely do." Patricia beamed, her fake sorrow instantly evaporating. "He just secured a $500,000 budget for our upcoming renovation. We are turning the entire property into a modern masterpiece." Across the lawn, Jamal was holding court with a group of men who looked exactly like him. They were local cryptocurrency investors and tech wannabes wearing expensive sneakers with tailored suits. Jamal held a premium cigar in one hand and a glass of bourbon in the other, projecting the aura of a self-made titan of industry. "The key to decentralized finance is leverage," Jamal bragged loudly. "I just pulled 500,000 in liquid capital using this estate as collateral. The bank threw the money at me because my portfolio is so robust. We are dropping 100 grand just on the custom Italian marble for the new foyer. The rest goes straight into a high-yield digital asset protocol. By this time next year, I will buy the house next door just for a storage closet." His friends laughed uproariously, clapping him on the back and raising their glasses in a toast to his fictional brilliance. They had no idea that the man they were cheering for was completely broke, facing an active eviction notice from his previous landlord, and currently financing this very party on maxed-out retail credit cards. Diana was the centerpiece of the entire delusion. She sat on a plush velvet throne rented specifically for the occasion, surrounded by expensive baby gifts. She was holding her smartphone out at arm's length, broadcasting the entire event live to her social media followers. "Look at this gorgeous setup, you guys!" Diana squealed to her digital audience, panning the camera across the champagne tower and the string quartet. "This is what happens when you manifest your dream life. My incredible husband is officially taking over the guest house to build his new media empire. We are expanding, we are growing, and we are leaving all the negative energy behind." She aimed the camera at the guest house carefully, keeping the gaping, unpermitted demolition hole out of the frame. "Some people could not handle watching us succeed," Diana continued, her voice dripping with venomous passive aggression directed entirely at me. "Some people would rather sit in their lonely, sad little apartments and judge us because they lack the vision to build real wealth. But we do not let the haters stop our grind. We are stepping into our billionaire era today." Richard stood near the outdoor bar, accepting congratulations from his old golfing buddies. He puffed out his chest, completely intoxicated by the facade of his restored wealth. He genuinely believed his forged paperwork had saved him. He truly felt like the smartest man in the entire room, outwitting the banking system and reclaiming his rightful place at the top of the social hierarchy. The arrogance radiating from the backyard was palpable. It was a spectacular monument to their greed, vanity, and profound stupidity. They drank champagne, stood on my grass, and loudly mocked my existence to anyone who would listen. They felt completely invincible. They believed they had successfully discarded the family scapegoat and secured a golden future. They were entirely unaware that the catering staff they hired were currently walking past the front gates, where a very different kind of arrival was about to take place. The music swelled, the glasses clinked, and the laughter echoed across the pristine lawn building to a crescendo of absolute delusion, just moments before the harsh, unforgiving reality of federal law was scheduled to crash their perfect party. I parked my sleek black sedan just outside the towering wrought iron gates of the estate. The afternoon sun glinted off the hood as I cut the engine. I stepped out of the vehicle, the sharp click of my stiletto heels against the pavement, signaling the end of their delusion. I had chosen my wardrobe for this exact moment with surgical precision. I wore an impeccably tailored charcoal gray power suit with a crisp white silk blouse underneath. It was a suit designed for the boardroom, meant to project absolute authority and ruthless competence. It stood in stark contrast to the pastel sundresses and casual linen blazers currently occupying my backyard. David pulled up right behind me in his own vehicle. He stepped out carrying the thick black leather binder containing every single piece of our financial artillery. He looked exactly like what he was, a high-priced corporate attorney who destroyed lives for a living. Following closely behind him was an unmarked dark gray SUV. Two plainclothes police officers stepped out of the vehicle. They wore casual jackets over their tactical vests, their badges hidden, but their presence undeniably authoritative. I walked over to the officers and nodded. "Thank you for coming, gentlemen," I said softly. "We will wait right here by the driveway," the taller officer replied, crossing his arms and settling into a discreet position near the stone pillars of the front gate. "We have the warrants ready. Just give us the signal when you need us to step in." I turned to David. He offered a tight, confident smile and tapped the leather binder. "Everything is in order," he assured me. "Let us go crash a party." We walked through the open gates, passing a row of luxury catering vans parked along the circular driveway. The distant sound of the string quartet drifted through the warm afternoon air, mingling with the arrogant laughter of my family and their oblivious guests. With every step I took up the long paved driveway, I felt a heavy weight lifting from my shoulders. For 34 years I had walked this exact path, feeling like an unwanted ghost, shrinking myself to fit into their narrow expectations. Today I was walking up my own driveway as the executioner. We bypassed the front door of the main mansion and followed the stone path that wrapped around the side of the house, leading directly to the backyard. The catered spectacle came into full view. The massive white canvas tents billowed gently in the breeze. Waiters carried silver trays of expensive appetizers. The champagne fountain caught the sunlight, sparkling like the fake wealth they were celebrating. David and I stepped onto the pristine green grass. At first, no one noticed us. The country club guests were too absorbed in their own conversations, sipping expensive wine and admiring the elaborate floral arrangements. But my sharp corporate attire was a jarring visual disruption in their sea of soft pastels and floral prints. A few heads began to turn. Whispers started rippling through the outer edges of the crowd. It took exactly 30 seconds for my mother's highly tuned social radar to detect the disruption. Patricia was standing near the outdoor bar, laughing with a group of wealthy neighbors, when her eyes darted toward the side entrance. Her smile instantly vanished, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated panic. She slammed her crystal flute down on the bar counter, spilling expensive champagne over the edge, and marched directly toward me. Her pastel suit fluttered as she practically sprinted across the manicured lawn, desperate to intercept me before I could reach the center of the gathering. Patricia cut me off just a few feet past the edge of the patio, stepping aggressively into my path to physically block me from advancing any further into the crowd. Her face was flushed and her eyes darted frantically toward the guests to see who was watching. What on earth do you think you are doing? Patricia hissed through gritted teeth, keeping her voice low to avoid a scene. You are not welcome here. I stopped walking and looked down at her. I did not shrink back. I stood perfectly straight, my posture radiating the cold confidence she had always tried to beat out of me. I am just here to join the celebration, Mother, I replied, my voice carrying a smooth, icy calm. It seemed like a momentous occasion. Patricia looked me up and down, her lip curling in absolute disgust as she took in my tailored gray suit. Are you here to beg for a handout? She spat, her tone dripping with venom. Because you are ruining Diana's aesthetic. This is a high society event, Natalie. We have important investors here. We have the country club president here. You cannot just waltz in wearing a drab business suit, looking like some miserable corporate drone. You are embarrassing us. I glanced over her shoulder. Diana was still sitting on her velvet throne across the yard, holding her smartphone and broadcasting to her followers. Jamal was laughing with his fake investor friends. They had not spotted me yet, but the crowd parting around us was quickly drawing attention. I am not here for a handout, I assured her, shifting my gaze back to her panicked face. And I really do not care about Diana's aesthetic. I have some important business to discuss with my father and my brother-in-law. David stepped forward, standing tall right beside me. He held the black leather binder tightly under his arm. Patricia finally noticed him, her eyes widening as she took in his expensive suit and serious demeanor. Who is this? Patricia demanded, her voice wavering slightly. If this is your cheap lawyer, you can both turn around and walk right back out those gates. Richard already told you we do not need your money, and we do not want you here. Jamal secured a $500,000 line of credit. We are rich, Natalie. We are rich, Natalie. Patricia spat the words with venomous pride. I looked at the woman who spent my life measuring my worth against a bank statement. I did not argue or raise my voice. I simply stepped around her. Patricia reached out to grab my arm, but David smoothly intercepted her, stepping between us, with a firm warning that touching me would constitute assault. Patricia gasped, pulling her hand back as if burned, stumbling backward. I continued my walk across the pristine lawn, moving purposefully toward the center of the gathering. The string quartet, noticing the sudden shift in atmosphere, faltered. The cellist hit a sour note before the ensemble ground to an awkward halt. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the splashing champagne fountain and murmurs of confused country club guests. Across the yard, Diana looked up from her velvet throne. Her phone was clutched in her hand, camera pointed squarely at her face. When she saw me, her eyes narrowed. She recognized the threat immediately. My presence was a dark cloud invading her sunny, delusional narrative. But Diana was nothing if not a performer. Instead of shrinking away, she leaned into her influencer persona. She saw an opportunity to elevate her status by stepping on mine. Diana handed her phone to a nearby friend, whispering a quick instruction to keep recording. She wanted this confrontation documented for her followers. She stood up, smoothing the front of her expensive maternity gown, and walked over to the small stage that had been set up for the live music. She snatched the microphone from the microphone stand, the speakers emitting a sharp squeal of feedback that made several guests wince and cover their ears. "Excuse me, everyone. Can I have your attention, please?" Diana announced, her voice echoing loudly across the lawn. The wealthy guests turned their focus to the golden child of the Williams family. I know we are all here to celebrate the new baby and this incredible multi-million-dollar renovation, but it looks like we have an unexpected guest who just could not bear to miss the party. She pointed directly at me. The crowd parted even further, leaving David and me standing alone in a clearing of manicured green grass. Hundreds of eyes locked onto my gray suit. For those of you who do not know, Diana continued, her tone dripping with mock sweetness. This is my older sister, Natalie. She used to live right there in the guest house. You know, the dark, depressing little box we are currently tearing down to make room for Jamal's new executive media studio. A few uncomfortable chuckles rippled through the audience. Diana paced the edge of the stage, feeding off the attention. Natalie has always struggled to find her footing. She chose a very boring, very safe little life crunching numbers in a cubicle. For years, my generous parents let her stay on this magnificent property because she simply could not make it on her own in the real world. Diana stopped pacing and looked right at me, a vicious smirk spreading across her perfectly contoured face. But sometimes progress requires clearing out the old to make way for the new. So let us all give a round of applause to my older sister who finally moved out so people with actual potential could build a real family home. She clapped her hands directly into the microphone, the amplified sound ringing like gunshots. The reaction from the audience was exactly what Diana wanted. The country club snobs, entirely oblivious to the catastrophic financial reality lurking beneath their feet, joined in. They clapped politely, offering tight, condescending smiles in my direction. They whispered to each other behind manicured hands, judging my severe business attire and my lack of a wealthy husband. They looked at me with a mixture of pity and superiority, completely buying into the narrative that I was the pathetic, discarded spinster sister making a desperate appearance at a high society event. Jamal stepped up onto the stage to join his wife. He wrapped a supportive arm around Diana's waist and grabbed the microphone with his free hand. He wore a smug, arrogant grin that made my stomach turn. "Thank you for coming, Natalie," Jamal said, his voice booming with fake magnanimity. "It takes a lot of guts to show up here today. We know it must be hard for you to watch us transform the space you stagnated in for so long. But do not worry. Once the $500,000 renovations are complete, we might invite you back to see what true success looks like. Maybe we will even let you sweep the new Italian marble floors." The fake investor friends Jamal had invited roared with laughter, raising their glasses of expensive bourbon in a mocking toast. My father Richard stood near the bar, his chest puffed out, clearly pleased that his son-in-law was putting me in my place. Patricia had managed to rejoin the crowd, hiding her earlier panic behind a mask of haughty validation. I stood perfectly still. I did not flush with embarrassment. I did not shrink under the weight of their collective judgment. I did not clench my fists or break eye contact. My face remained an absolute mask of cold, emotionless stone. I let the laughter wash over me. I let the applause echo. I let them dig their graves as deeply as humanly possible. Every single insult, every condescending smile, and every boastful claim about their fake wealth was just fuel for the inferno I was about to unleash. They were performing a spectacular play on a stage built of dynamite. I looked at David. He did not say a word, but he shifted his grip on the black leather binder, turning it slightly so the silver clasp caught the sunlight. That was the only signal I needed. The time for listening was over. I stepped forward, leaving my spot on the manicured lawn, and began walking directly toward the small wooden stage. My pace was unhurried, measured, and entirely deliberate. The polite murmurs of the crowd faded into a tense, expectant silence. People parted before me like water, stepping back to avoid making eye contact. They were expecting a hysterical meltdown. They were anticipating the broken sister lashing out in a fit of bitter jealousy. What they got instead was the calculated approach of an executioner. David followed exactly one step behind my right shoulder, holding the black leather binder that carried the weight of absolute destruction. Jamal noticed my approach first. His smug smile faltered, replaced by a flash of genuine annoyance. He puffed out his chest and took a half step forward, clearly intending to physically block me from ascending the short wooden staircase. But David instantly matched his movement. My attorney did not say a single word. He simply leveled a cold, unyielding glare at Jamal that communicated a severe legal threat. Jamal hesitated, his fake bravado wilting under the pressure of a real professional. He stepped aside, allowing me to glide up the steps. I stopped right in front of Diana. She looked at me with wide, confused eyes. Her perfectly glossed lips parted slightly as she tried to formulate a snide comment, but my absolute silence unsettled her completely. Without asking, I reached out and firmly grasped the microphone. For a split second, she held on, but the sheer, unwavering dominance in my gaze forced her fingers to loosen. I slid the microphone smoothly from her hand. Diana shrank back, instinctively bumping against Jamal for support. I turned to face the sprawling backyard. Hundreds of eyes were locked onto me. The wealthy neighbors, the country club board members, the fake cryptocurrency investors, all of them waited with bated breath. I let the silence stretch for 5 agonizing seconds. I wanted them to feel the gravity of the moment. I wanted the heavy, humid air to settle over them before I shattered their reality. I raised the microphone to my lips. "Diana is entirely correct," I said, my voice echoing crystal clear across the pristine lawn. "This is not my home anymore." A ripple of confused whispers swept through the audience. Diana let out a sharp, triumphant breath behind me, mistakenly thinking I was publicly conceding defeat. She whispered something to Jamal about me finally admitting my proper place in the hierarchy. I ignored her and extended my left hand toward David. My attorney opened the black leather binder. He extracted a thick stack of watermarked legal documents and placed them squarely into my palm. The crisp rustle of heavy paper was audible through the microphone. I held the documents up for the entire crowd to see. "This is not my home anymore," I repeated, my tone dropping to a sharp clinical chill. "But it is certainly not yours either. You see, everyone standing here today has been invited to celebrate a massive illusion. 3 years ago, the patriarch of this family, my father Richard, ran completely out of money. He exhausted every line of credit, leveraged every asset, and fully defaulted on his massive mortgage to maintain the country club lifestyle you all admire so much. He went completely, undeniably bankrupt. The bank foreclosed on this entire estate. The backyard went deathly quiet. You could hear the gentle breeze rustling the leaves of the oak trees. No one moved. No one spoke. Richard did not negotiate a secret extension with the bank. I continued, locking my gaze directly on my father, who was standing frozen near the outdoor bar. He was served with a final notice of eviction, but the bank never seized the property because an independent financial firm stepped in at the final hour. That firm purchased the toxic debt in its entirety and acquired the official deed to this $2.5 million estate. The name of that holding company is Apex Holdings Limited Liability Company. I looked at my mother, who was currently clutching her pearl necklace. I looked at Diana, whose face was rapidly losing all of its artificial color. As a forensic accountant, I specialize in restructuring debt and managing corporate assets. I projected, ensuring my voice reached the very back of the canvas tents. I am the sole owner and chief executive officer of Apex Holdings. I bought the debt. I own the limited liability company. I hold the deed. You do not own this property, Richard. Diana, you did not just inherit a family home to tear down for a podcast studio. You are not wealthy homeowners throwing a lavish housewarming party. You are my tenants, and you are currently 6 months behind on your rent. The collective gasp from the high society audience sounded like all the oxygen being sucked out of the yard. It was a visceral, physical reaction to the absolute scandal unfolding before their eyes. Near the outdoor bar, Patricia physically recoiled. The shock hit her nervous system so hard that her fingers went completely slack. The expensive crystal champagne flute slipped from her trembling hand. It hit the stone patio with a sharp, explosive crash, shattering into 100 glittering pieces. The sound punctuated my revelation like a judge banging a gavel. She stared at the broken glass, her jaw trembling, as the reality of her shattered social standing washed over her entirely. Richard turned the color of ash. All the blood drained from his face, leaving him a ghost of the arrogant man who had proudly accepted congratulations just minutes prior. He gripped the edge of the bar counter so hard his knuckles turned stark white, his eyes darting frantically around the yard as his wealthy peers began to whisper and point. His entire identity, built on decades of projected superiority and financial dominance, disintegrated in a matter of seconds. The fake investor friends Jamal brought started backing away. The illusion was dead. The silence hung over the manicured lawn for only a moment before the sheer weight of the revelation triggered an explosive reaction. Diana could not process the total destruction of her reality. She gripped the microphone stand, her knuckles turning white, and leaned forward with a look of pure, unadulterated panic masking itself as rage. "You are lying!" Diana screamed, her voice cracking as she pointed a shaking finger at my face. You are completely lying. You do not own this estate. Dad is a millionaire. Jamal is a billionaire. You are just a jealous, pathetic accountant, making up insane stories to ruin my housewarming party. Someone call security and get this psycho out of my yard right now. I did not flinch. I did not raise my voice to match her hysterical tone. I simply turned slightly to David and extended my hand once again. My attorney pulled a second set of documents from the black leather binder. These papers were topped with bright red municipal seals and bold black warning text from the city building authority. I took the heavy stack of citations and held them up to the sunlight. I assure you, Diana, the city inspector who visited this property yesterday afternoon, does not think I am lying. I projected into the microphone, my voice cutting through the thick, humid air with absolute authority. And neither does the homeowner association. I have the official reports right here. It seems your little open-concept demolition project was not the brilliant architectural vision you thought it was. The crowd of country club elites started whispering frantically. Several guests began actively inching toward the exit gates, eager to distance themselves from the impending legal fallout. I warned you about pulling the proper building permits. I continued, looking directly into my sister's terrified eyes. I sent you a text message specifically advising you to check with the city before you let unlicensed discount excavators start tearing down load-bearing brick walls. But you replied that it was your house, and you would smash whatever walls you wanted. You even broadcast your crime live to the internet. That was a spectacularly foolish choice. Diana swallowed hard, her arrogant posture finally beginning to crumple. Jamal stepped up beside her, his chest puffed out in a weak display of intimidation. "We do not need your permission," Jamal spat, trying to salvage his reputation in front of his fleeing investor buddies. "We are renovating our property. We have capital. We will handle whatever minor fee the city wants to throw at us for a basic noise complaint." I let out a sharp, cynical laugh that echoed across the ruined lawn. A minor fee for a noise complaint. Jamal, your discount crew took a heavy machine and completely severed the pressurized primary water main for a $2.5 million estate. You flooded the entire first floor. You destroyed custom Brazilian cherry hardwood and structural support beams. The city did not issue a noise complaint. They issued an emergency stop work order and condemned the first floor. Patricia let out a strangled gasp near the bar, finally comprehending why I had refused to pay the disaster mitigation bill. She realized I was letting them drown in their own mess. I stepped closer to Diana, holding the municipal citations so she could clearly see the staggering numbers printed on the front page. "By the way, Diana," I said, my voice dropping to a smooth, lethal cadence, "your highly illegal, completely unpermitted demolition triggered severe municipal penalties. The city just issued a structural damage fine for extreme negligence and unlicensed construction. The total penalty is exactly $150,000. Diana physically recoiled as if she had been struck. What she gasped, her voice barely a whisper. $150,000, I repeated loudly, ensuring the entire audience heard the exact price of her vanity. And here is the best part. Because you and Jamal initiated the unapproved construction, and because you signed the initial response forms when the emergency inspectors arrived yesterday, assuming you were the legitimate homeowners, the city issued these fines directly to the residents who caused the destruction, not the property owner. The bills are entirely in your name." I paused, letting the devastating reality of a six-figure municipal debt sink into her mind. "You wanted to play the wealthy homeowner for your social media followers," I said coldly. "Now you get to experience the actual cost of your reckless entitlement. Good luck paying off a $150,000 city penalty with maxed-out credit cards and fake cryptocurrency." Diana stared at the red municipal seals on the paperwork. Her breath hitched in her throat. The carefully constructed influencer facade she had spent years building shattered into a million pieces. The reality of a crushing, inescapable financial ruin hit her nervous system all at once. She realized she was not a rich homeowner creating a luxury media studio. She was a tenant, who had just caused catastrophic illegal damage to someone else's property, and she owed the government a fortune she could never repay. All the color drained from Diana's face. Her eyes rolled back slightly. Her knees buckled beneath her. She collapsed downward, her expensive maternity gown pooling on the wooden stage as she sank to the floor in absolute despair. The smartphone she had been using to broadcast her fake wealth slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the wooden planks, the screen cracking instantly upon impact. Jamal lunged forward trying to catch her, but the sheer, overwhelming gravity of the public humiliation kept him firmly rooted in a state of absolute shock. The wealthy country club guests were openly staring now, their polite, refined facades completely gone forever. They were witnessing the total financial execution of the spoiled golden child. I stood tall above her, holding the heavy microphone, feeling the cool, crisp breeze sweep across my property, devoid of any sympathy. Jamal stepped over his sobbing wife without reaching down to help her. His only concern was saving face. He marched up to the edge of the stage, stopping just inches from where I stood. He puffed out his chest, trying to use his physical size to intimidate me. It was a tactic that might have worked on someone who did not hold the keys to his literal and figurative prison cell. "You think you are so smart?" Jamal sneered. "You think municipal fines are going to break us? You are completely bluffing about this ownership thing. But even if you bought this property, you are still a loser playing accountant. We do not care about your little city penalties. We have real capital. We just got approved for a $500,000 line of credit against this house. We are taking out $500,000 in liquid cash this week. We will pay your fines and fix the floors." Richard suddenly found his voice. He pushed through the crowd, standing next to his son-in-law. "That is right," Richard barked, pointing a shaking finger at me. "I spoke to the senior loan officer myself. The fast-track application was approved this morning. We are pulling the equity out of our home. So take your fake holding company and get off my property before I have you arrested." I looked at my father, a man so blindly arrogant he would rather double down on a lie than admit defeat. Then I looked back at Jamal. The sheer stupidity of their confidence was staggering. I let out a slow, deliberate laugh of genuine amusement. I handed the microphone to David for a brief second and reached into the black leather binder. I pulled out a single, heavily watermarked page. It was a printed copy of the digital packet Jamal had transmitted to the bank the previous day. I took the microphone back, locking onto Jamal. "A $500,000 line of credit," I repeated, ensuring every single guest heard the exact amount. "That is an impressive sum." I received the automated notification from the bank regarding that exact loan application at 9 o'clock this morning. "I know the application went into the pending approval stage. I know you requested the maximum limit." Jamal grinned, thinking I was finally conceding to his financial superiority. "See," Jamal bragged to the crowd. "Even she admits it. We have the money." "You do not have a single dime," I stated. "To actually secure a home equity line of credit, you must provide the bank with a clear chain of title and a signed declaration of sole ownership. Since Richard has not owned this estate in 3 years, you had a slight logistical problem. So you decided to get creative. You took the original outdated property deed from 20 years ago. You scanned it into your computer. You carefully erased the old filing dates, altered the timestamps, and created a digital forgery to make it look like Richard and Patricia still owned the estate." Jamal's arrogant grin vanished instantly. He took a physical step back, his eyes darting frantically toward my attorney. Then I continued, my voice echoing relentlessly. "You had Richard and Patricia sign the fraudulent loan application. And finally, you sat at the desk in the home office, logged into the bank portal, and transmitted those forged documents across state lines to a centralized server." Richard gasped, clutching his chest. He looked at Jamal in absolute horror, finally realizing the depth of the grave his son-in-law had dug for them. "You thought you bypassed the holding company," I said. "You thought you could just submit a fake deed and walk away with $500,000. But here is the fatal flaw in your brilliant financial strategy, Jamal. The bank required the signature of the primary legal entity holding the property title to authorize the release of any equity. You forged the signature of the chief executive officer of Apex Holdings to push the paperwork through your corrupt fast-track contact. I stepped right to the edge of the stage, towering over him. But Jamal, I am the chief executive officer of Apex Holdings. You forged my name on a federal banking document. The absolute silence in the backyard was deafening. Even the wind seemed to stop blowing. You did not outsmart the bank, I whispered into the microphone, my words hitting him like physical blows. You did not secure a loan. You did not unlock $500,000. Because my forensic accounting software intercepted your application the exact second you clicked submit, I authorized the bank to process it to the pending stage simply to ensure you fully committed to the act. You committed identity theft. You committed massive bank fraud. And by transmitting those forged documents to a financial institution, you committed federal wire fraud. Jamal's breathing became shallow and rapid. He tried to open his mouth to offer a defense, but his throat was completely dry. There was no escaping a paper trail that he had personally authored and electronically signed. He looked at the watermarked printout in my hand, recognizing the exact digital packet he had foolishly crafted in the study just 24 hours ago. Richard staggered backward, knocking over a decorative cocktail table. Glasses shattered against the stone patio. The remaining guests were practically holding their breath, paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of the crime unfolding before them. Patricia let out a high-pitched, desperate wail, finally grasping that her precious country club status was not just damaged, it was entirely annihilated. They had thrown a lavish, catered party to celebrate their own successful journey into the federal justice system. My predatory smile deepened. I looked down at the pathetic, arrogant man who had endlessly mocked my accounting career and explicitly told me to sweep his brand-new luxury floors. You played a very high-stakes game with the absolute wrong accountant today, Jamal. I lowered the microphone and gave a crisp nod toward the side gate. The two plainclothes officers waiting near the driveway stepped from the shadows of the oak trees. They moved with absolute authority, their police badges clearly visible on silver chains around their necks. They strode across the pristine lawn, their heavy boots leaving deep indentations in the manicured grass. The remaining country club guests parted like the Red Sea, backing away to avoid being associated with the impending arrests. Jamal turned his head and saw the officers approaching. The last shred of his fake crypto-billionaire persona evaporated. Pure terror washed over his face. He looked at the officers, then at the towering wooden fence enclosing the backyard, and finally at the open side gate. His fight-or-flight response kicked in, and his brain chose the most foolish option available. Jamal bolted. He spun around, leaving his sobbing wife on the floor, and sprinted toward the catering tents. He shoved past a terrified waiter, knocking a silver tray of caviar blinis onto the grass. But Jamal was wearing slick-bottomed designer loafers, and the lawn was still damp from the morning dew. He did not make it 10 yards. His foot slipped violently on the wet grass. He tumbled forward, crashing hard into a massive floral arrangement before hitting the ground face first. Before Jamal could attempt to scramble to his feet, the taller officer was on top of him. The officer planted a firm knee into Jamal's back, pinning him securely against the muddy lawn. The metallic click of handcuffs snapping shut echoed across the silent backyard. It was the definitive sound of a ruined life. Jamal Williams, the officer, announced, his voice booming with official authority. You are under arrest for federal wire fraud, bank fraud, and identity theft. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Jamal thrashed weakly against the grass, his expensive tailored tech vest now covered in dirt and crushed flower petals. He whined something about a misunderstanding, but the officers hauled him roughly to his feet, ignoring his pathetic protests. Seeing his co-conspirator in handcuffs, my father decided to deploy a desperate defense mechanism. Richard stumbled backward against the outdoor bar, clutching the left side of his chest. He squeezed his eyes shut and began taking loud, wheezing breaths. He slumped down against the stone counter, knocking over another row of champagne flutes. My heart. Richard groaned loudly, playing directly to the remaining audience. Someone call an ambulance. I am having a massive heart attack. The stress of these lies is killing me. David let out a dry, cynical sigh. The second police officer did not look even slightly convinced. He walked over to where my father was slumped against the bar, pulling a thick envelope from his tactical jacket. "We already have paramedics on standby out front," the officer stated, unfazed by the performance. "They can check your vitals. But regardless of your medical condition, Mr. Williams, you are not leaving the jurisdiction. You are being served with a mandatory federal court summons for your direct participation in the submission of fraudulent bank documents. You will surrender your passport to the authorities within 24 hours, and you are expected in federal court on Monday morning. If you fail to appear, a warrant will be issued for your arrest." The officer dropped the heavy summons envelope directly onto Richard's chest. Miraculously, my father's severe cardiac distress seemed to instantly stabilize. He stared down at the federal paperwork resting on his shirt, his breathing returning to a remarkably normal, terrified rhythm. Patricia watched her entire world disintegrate. Her husband was facing federal court. Her son-in-law was currently being marched across the lawn in handcuffs. Her wealthy friends were recording the entire humiliating spectacle on their phones. She realized she had absolutely no money, no social standing, and no power left. Patricia fell to her knees right there on the wet stone patio. She ignored the broken glass from her dropped champagne flute. She crawled toward the wooden stage where I stood. Tears of despair streamed down her face, ruining her expensive makeup. She looked up at me, clasping her hands together in a desperate posture of prayer. "Natalie, please." Patricia begged, her voice cracking with raw hysteria. "You have to stop this. Tell the police you made a mistake. Tell them you gave Jamal permission to sign the papers. We can fix the house. We can pay you back. We are family. You cannot send your father and brother-in-law to federal prison. Think about Diana. Think about the baby. How can you do this to your sister's baby?" I looked down at the woman who had spent 34 years treating me like an unwanted burden. I looked at Diana, who was still weeping on the stage floor, mourning the loss of her fake wealth, rather than the arrest of her husband. I felt no pity. I felt no guilt. I felt the profound relief of a surgically removed tumor. "Family does not commit felonies to steal from family," I replied, my voice carrying a cold, absolute finality that echoed through the entire yard. "You kicked me out of my own home and tried to rob me blind to fund a fake lifestyle. You made your choices, and now you will pay the price. As for Diana's baby, I hope Jamal learns how to make license plates in federal prison so he can send child support." Patricia let out a devastated sob and collapsed forward onto the stone patio. I stepped down from the wooden stage, perfectly avoiding her grasping hands. I walked past the silent, staring country club guests. I walked past the ruined floral arrangements and the abandoned champagne tower. I walked straight down the driveway, my head held high, leaving all of their miserable dynasty far behind me. 6 months have passed since that spectacular afternoon. The federal justice system is often notoriously slow, but when it is handed an impenetrable fortress of forensic financial evidence neatly organized in a black leather binder, it moves with devastating certainty. The aftermath of my family's incredible arrogance was swift, brutal, and thoroughly deserved. Jamal's criminal trial was exceptionally short and entirely humiliating. His high-priced defense attorney immediately dropped him the moment the massive retainer check bounced. He was forced to rely on a public defender who took exactly one look at the forged digital packet, the logged internet protocol addresses, and the verified federal signatures before aggressively advising a guilty plea. Jamal tried to charm his way out of the sentencing, utilizing the same fake tech visionary persona he used to manipulate my sister. But the federal judge was entirely unimpressed. Jamal is currently serving a 72-month sentence in a minimum security federal correctional facility. I occasionally check the public prison registry online just to confirm his inmate number and mailing address. I sincerely hope he is enjoying the strict daily routine, and just as I predicted on the day of his arrest, his smooth crypto-billionaire hands are now actively engaged in manual prison labor. Richard managed to avoid a lengthy prison sentence by completely abandoning his pride and throwing his son-in-law directly under the bus. My father testified that Jamal masterminded the entire digital forgery scheme, claiming he was just a confused older man who did not understand the internet documents he was signing. However, Richard did not escape the financial and social guillotine. The exorbitant legal fees required to keep him out of a federal cell completely drained the last remaining drops of his hidden credit and drained whatever small retirement accounts he had left. He was left entirely bankrupt. Worse than the financial ruin was the social execution. Richard was formally and permanently expelled from his precious country club. The board of directors held an emergency vote to distance themselves from a convicted fraudster. Helen, the woman Patricia had desperately tried to impress at the party, personally signed the expulsion letter. Richard was forced to clear out his mahogany golf locker while the security guards watched him. Patricia became a total social pariah overnight. Her phone completely stopped ringing. The elite society ladies who once drank her expensive champagne now actively crossed the street to avoid making eye contact with her at the grocery store. Diana's downfall was perhaps the most spectacular tragedy to witness. The internet is a ruthless, unforgiving place for exposed frauds. Her viral video broadcasting the illegal demolition was downloaded, analyzed, and mocked by millions of people. Brands immediately severed their sponsorships and issued public statements distancing themselves from her criminal associations. Without Jamal's fake wealth to prop up her lavish lifestyle, her daily reality collapsed instantly. The repo men arrived just 3 weeks after the disastrous party, towing away her leased luxury vehicles in broad daylight while her neighbors watched. The city relentlessly pursued the $150,000 structural damage fine. Since Diana had absolutely zero liquid capital, the collections agency successfully filed to seize her designer bags, her expensive jewelry, and every single asset of value she possessed to cover the debt. Stripped of her aesthetic and her funding, she was legally forced to vacate her upscale rental. Today, the Golden Child lives in a tiny, cramped two-bedroom apartment in a rundown neighborhood on the outer edges of the city. She shares that depressing space with Richard and Patricia, raising her newborn baby in an environment filled with cheap linoleum and thin walls. They are all trapped in a tiny box of their own making, constantly suffocating on their shared bitterness, pointing fingers at one another, and arguing relentlessly over their collective failure. As for me, the estate has been completely transformed. I hired a team of fully licensed, incredibly talented local contractors to repair the catastrophic water damage. The ruined Brazilian cherry floors were carefully ripped out and replaced with stunning wide-plank European oak that brightens the entire first floor. The gaping illegal hole in the guest house was professionally sealed, and I ultimately decided to have the interior of that secondary structure beautifully remodeled into a massive private library and forensic accounting home office. I finally have the exact space I need to continue expanding my highly successful firm. The heavy toxic energy that used to choke the hallways of this mansion is entirely gone. I do not have to hide in my room to avoid my mother's harsh criticisms or my father's impossible demands. I do not have to watch my sister get praised for simply existing while my hard work is actively dismissed. The property is immaculate, quiet, and completely mine. I am currently sitting on the expansive stone patio of my fully repaired, beautifully renovated $2.5 million estate. The sun is just beginning to set, casting a brilliant array of orange and purple hues across the pristine water of the swimming pool. The manicured lawn where the police once marched is lush and green. I am wearing comfortable silk loungewear, not a stiff corporate suit. I lift a crystal glass of incredibly expensive red wine to my lips and take a slow, highly satisfying sip. The rich vintage warms my throat as I look out over my property in absolute silence and profound peace. I do not feel any guilt. I do not feel any lingering sorrow for the family I left behind. They built a house of cards on a foundation of lies, and I simply allowed the wind to blow. The trash took itself out. The story of Natalie and her family serves as a powerful testament to the importance of building a life on a foundation of absolute truth. rather than a fragile facade of lies. It highlights the devastating consequences of entitlement vanity and the toxic dynamic of the family scapegoat. For decades, Natalie was conditioned to believe she was less valuable simply because she refused to participate in her parents' grand illusion of wealth. But her quiet resilience and financial independence became her ultimate armor. The greatest lesson we can take from this incredible saga is that your true worth is never defined by people who refuse to see your potential. When toxic family members try to diminish your accomplishments to elevate themselves, the most powerful response is often calculated silence and unyielding boundaries. Natalie did not need to scream, cry, or beg for respect. She simply removed her safety net and allowed their own arrogant, malicious choices to dictate their downfall. True freedom comes from walking away from the constant demand for conditional approval and refusing to finance the delusions of those who mistreat you. You do not owe your success, your resources, or your peace of mind to people who use the word family merely as a tool for manipulation. If you have ever had to walk away from a toxic environment or stand your ground against manipulative people who underestimated your worth, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Share your own stories of sweet victory and setting healthy boundaries in the comments below, because your journey to peace absolutely deserves to be heard.